propeller plane shook violently as it crossed the icy skies above Alaska. Outside a small round window, Professor Shonku saw nothing except endless white snow and dark mountains under the pale moonlight. The cold seemed to creep even through the thick glass. Inside his coat pocket was the telegram that had brought him here. Come to Nome immediately. Strange deaths, people vanishing into snow, creature of white smoke, need your help. Tommy Hargraves was not the sort of a man who frightened easily. A geologist and explorer, he had spent years in frozen deserts and dangerous caves. If Tommy sounded terrified, then something truly was unnaturally happening. The plane landed roughly on the frozen runway of Nome just after evening. The moment Professor Shonku stepped outside, an icy wind cut across his face like a knife. Slow flakes swirled under the yellow airport lights. In the distance, the sea looked black and lifeless. Tommy stood waiting beside a jeep. But the moment Shonku saw him, he realized how serious matters were. Tommy's beard was unshaven, his eyes were bloodshot, and his hands trembled slightly. Shonku! Tommy grabbed his arm tightly. Thanks heavens, you came! You look exhausted, said Shonku calmly. What is actually happening here? Tommy looked around before answering. Not here. People are listening. The jeep drove through the silent town. Nome looked strangely deserted. Doors were shut. Windows were covered. And not a single child played outside. At last, they reached Tommy's wooden cabin near the snowy hills. Inside, beside a roaring fireplace, Tommy poured hot coffee into metal cups. Then he spoke in a low voice. It started 3 weeks ago. He unfolded a map on the table. A hunter named Kyle Jensen disappeared first. His dogs were found dead in the snow. No blood, no woods, just frozen solid. And the body? Asked Shonku. Never found. Tommy lit a cigarette nervously. Then others vanished. A fisherman, 2 miners, even reindeer from nearby villages. Every disappearance happened after midnight. Shonku adjusted his spectacles and his white smoke. Tommy's voice dropped to a whisper. Witnesses say a shape appears in the storm, not solid, not human, a moving cloud of white mist. It flows over the snow. Then suddenly the ground opens beneath us a victim. The ground's open? Yes, as if something underneath pulls them down. Professor Shonku remained silent for a moment. Interesting. Tommy stared at him. Huh? Interesting? People are dying. Fear clouds observation, Shonku replied calmly. Facts reveal truth. He opened his leather bag and carefully removed a small instrument resembling a silver compass. Tommy frowned. What's that? My etheric radiation detector. If the creature is not biological, perhaps it emits unusual energy. Tommy leaned closer to the fire. You still think this is science? Shonku smiled faintly. My dear Tommy, even the strangest mysteries as usual are. That night, the storm warns. Wind screamed across the frozen land like the cry of invisible spirits. The wooden cabin creaked constantly. Around midnight, Tommy suddenly froze. Did you hear that? Outside came a long, low howl. Not wolf, not wind, something else. Professor Shonku calmly stood and took his flashlight. Let us investigate. Tommy grabbed a file immediately. You're going outside? Certainly. The two men stepped into the storm. Snow whipped against their faces. Visibility was poor. Then Tommy pointed towards the distant hills. There! At first, Shonku saw nothing. But then slowly, through the white storm, something appeared. A moving shape. A drifting cloud of pale white smoke. It floated silently above the snow. No feet. No body. Only swirling vapor glowing faintly blue. Tommy whispered shakily, "That's it!" The creature moved slowly across the frozen plain. Then suddenly, the atomic ticker in Shonku's hand began clicking rapidly. Tick, 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 tick. Fascinating, murmured Shonku. But the smoke suddenly stopped moving, as though it sensed them. Then it turned. A freezing wave swept through the air. Tommy gasped, "Run!" But Shonku stood still. The white cloud rushed towards them with a terrifying speed. And then, crack! The snow beneath Tommy's feet collapsed. Tommy screamed as he began to sink into the ground. "Shonku!" Professor Shonku instantly fired a grappling line from his walking stick. The metal hook caught Tommy's jacket. With enormous effort, Shonku pulled him backward just as the snow pit closed again. The white smoke vanished instantly into the storm. Silence returned. Tommy lay panting on the snow. My God. Shonku knelt beside the collapsed area. Interesting. The snow here was warmer. Much warmer. He touched it carefully. Then his eyes narrowed. "This is no ghost," he said quietly. The next morning, Shonku examined the site carefully. He used strange devices for his bag: thermometers, magnetic needles, chemical sensors. Finally, he looked up at Tommy. "There is a volcanic heat beneath these hills." Tommy blinked. "Volcanic? Here?" "Yes. Underground tunnels, perhaps. The snow above becomes weak." "But that smoke thing, that," said Shonku, "is the real puzzle." By afternoon, they visited an old Inuit hunter named Ugluk, who lived near the coast. The old man listened silently while smoking from a pipe. Then he smoked. "My grandfather told stories of the snow spirit." Tommy rolled his eyes impatiently. "Not legends again?" But Shonku listened carefully. Ugluk continued, "It sleeps beneath the ice mountain. Sometimes it wakes hungry. What is it exactly? Asked Shonku. The old hunter pointed towards the northern cliffs. Inside the mountain, there are caves where the earth breathes. That phrase caught Shonku's attention immediately. The earth breathes. Suddenly, his eyes brightened. Tommy, of course. What? The smoke! That evening, Shonku spread maps across the cabin table. There are geometrical vents beneath the mountain, hot gases escaping through underground tunnels. Tommy frowned. You mean natural steam? Not ordinary steam. Some volcanic gases glow under certain conditions, especially in extreme cold. But steam doesn't drag people underground. True, said Shonku. Something else is involved. Then he pointed to the map. These disappearances form a pattern. Every victim vanished near the old mining tunnels. Tommy's expression changed. The abandoned gold mines. Exactly. Shonku stood up decisively. We go tonight. At 11 p.m., they reached the old mining area near the cliffs. The place looked terrifying. Broken wooden structures stood half buried in snow. Rusted machinery groaned in the wind. The entrance to the main tunnel was black as death. Tommy held the lantern tightly. I don't like this. Professor Shonku activated another device. A low humming sound filled the air. What does that machine do? Detects underground vibrations. Suddenly, the machine beeped loudly. Something was moving beneath them. Then came the howl again. The white smoke emerged from behind the cliffs. Closer now, larger, swirling violently. Tommy aimed his rifle nervously. The creature floated toward the mine entrance. And then, for the first time, Professor Shonku noticed something hidden inside the smoke. Two glowing red lights. Eyes. Good heavens, he whispered. The smoke rushed forward. Tommy fired. Bang! The bullet passed straight through the mist. Then the ground shook violently. A section of snow collapsed nearby, revealing a deep hole leading underground. The white creature vanished into it. Without hesitation, Shonku jumped down. Shonku! Tommy shouted before following him. They landed inside a vast underground cavern. Warm air rose from cracks in the rocks. Steam hissed everywhere, and they heard it, a deep breathing sound. The cavern floor trembled. Tommy lifted the lantern and froze in horror. Something enormous. He cleaned the steam. Not a ghost, not smoke. A gigantic pale creature covered in white fur. Its body blended perfectly with the vapor around it. Its eyes glowed red in darkness. The beast resembled a monstrous polar bear mixed with something reptilian. Long claws scraped against stone. Tommy whispered, Dear God. Professor Shonku stared in fascination. A prehistoric survivor. The creature roared thunderously. Steam exploded. Steam exploded from vents around its body, surrounded it in white smoke. That's why witnesses thought It was missed, shouted Tommy. The beast charged. The cavern shook violently. Tommy fired repeatedly, but bullets barely slowed down. Professor Shonku quickly removed a small metallic spear from his pocket. My annihilating pistol would collapse the cave, he muttered. Too dangerous. The creature lunged closer. At the last second, Shonku noticed the geothermal vents around the cavern walls. Then inspiration struck him. Tommy, shoot the steam pipes! Tommy immediately aimed upward. Bang! Bang! The rocky vents burst open. Scalding steam erupted across the cavern. The beast screamed terribly. Professor Shonku activated his electric shock device and hurled it directly into the steam cloud. Crack! Blue lightning exploded through the cavern. The creature roared once more, then collapsed heavily onto the rocks. Silence. Only steam hissed softly. Tommy breathed heavily. Is it dead? Professor Shonku examined the massive creature carefully. No, merely unconscious. Tommy stared at the beast. What exactly is this thing? Shonku spoke slowly. Perhaps a prehistoric species trapped underground for centuries. The geothermal caves kept it alive. And the disappearances? The weak snow above the tunnels collapsed whenever the beast hunted near the surface. Tommy shook his head in disbelief. So, the ghost of Nome was actually this? Professor Shonku smiled faintly. Nature often creates monsters far stronger, far stranger than imagination. Outside, dawn slowly rose over Alaska. Golden sunlight touched the snowy mountains. For the first time in weeks, the storm had stopped. As he stood outside the cave entrance, Tommy looked at his old friend with admiration. You know something, Shonku? Most men would have run away. Professor Shonku adjusted his spectacles calmly. My dear Tommy, fear is useful only when controlled. Then he looked towards the silent white wilderness, stretching endlessly ahead. Still, he added quietly, I cannot help wondering whether this creature was truly alone beneath the ice, far away in the frozen mountains. A strange howl echoed once again, and this time it was answered.